evening, folks. This is Rio 855, along with Retro Rio. And today, we're taking a look at the Genius series. I started this series with Norman Whitfield. It was basically started with Teddy Riley and people like that, but it initially started with Norman Whitfield. And today, we're going to look at Curtis Mayfield, a genius. Curtis Lee Mayfield, born June 3rd, 1942. And he died December 26, 1999. But let's look at it. Was an American singer, songwriter, guitarist, and record producer, and one of the most influential musicians behind soul, political conscious African American music. His first achieved success and recognition was with the impressions during the civil rights movement of the late 1950s and the 1960s, and later worked as a solo artist. He's from Chicago, Illinois. Yes. Let's look at it. Born in Chicago, Illinois, Mayfield started his musical career in a gospel choir. Moving to the north side, he met Jerry Butler, or let me say Jerry Iceman Butler, in 1956 at the age of 14, and joined the vocal group The Impression. He was a child prodigy as a songwriter. Mayfield became noted as one of the first musicians to bring more prevalent themes of social awareness into soul music. In 1965, he wrote People Get Ready for The Impressions, which displayed his more political charged songwriting. Ranked at number 24 on Rolling Stone list of 500 greatest songs of all time. The song received numerous other awards and was included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 500 songs that shaped rock and roll, as well as being inducted to the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1998. After leaving The Impressions in 1970, in the pursuit of a solo career, Mayfield released several albums, including the soundtrack for the black exploitation film Superfly in 1972. The soundtrack was noted for its socially conscious themes, mostly addressing problems surrounding inner city minorities such as crime, poverty, and drug abuse. The album was ranked at number 72 on Rolling Stone list of 500 greatest albums of all time. Mayfield was paralyzed from the neck down after lighting equipment fell on him during a live performance at Wingate Field in Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York on August 3rd, 1990. Despite this, he continued his career as a recording artist, releasing his final album, New World Order, in 1996. Mayfield won a Grammy Legend Award in 1994 and Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1995, and was a double inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of The Impressions in 1991 and again in 1999 as a solo artist. He was also a two-time Grammy Hall of Fame inductee. He died of complications of type 2 diabetes in 1999 at the age of 57. Wow. He should have been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist. Okay. Let me look at early life. Curtis Mayfield, as I say, he was born such and such, but the son of Marion Washington and Kenneth Mayfield, one of 5 children. Mayfield's father left the family when Curtis was 5. His mother, a maternal grandmother, moved the family into several Chicago public housing projects before settling in Cabrini Green. Wow. The famous project Cabrini Green. During his teen years, Mayfield attended Wells Community Academy High School before dropping out his sophomore year. His mother taught him piano, along with his grandmother encouraged him to enjoy gospel music. At the age of 7, he sang uh, publicly at his aunt's church with Northern Jubilee gospel singers. When he was 14 years old, he formed the Alpha Tones. When the Northern Jubilee gospel singers decided to try their luck in downtown Chicago, and Mayfield stayed behind. Fellow group member Sam Gooden was quoted, "It would have been nice to have him there with us, but of course your parents have the first say." Later in 1956, he joined his high school friend Jerry Butler's group, the Roosters, with brothers Arthur and Richard Brooks. He wrote and composed songs for the group, who would become the Impressions 2 years later. Yeah, let's look at the Impressions. Mayfield's career began in 1956 when he joined the Roosters in such and such. 2 years later, the Roosters, now included Sam Gooden, became the Impressions. The band had 2 hit singles with Butler: "For Your Precious Love," remember that, and "Come Back My Love." Then Butler left. Mayfield temporarily went with him, co-writing and performing on Butler's next hit, "He Will Break Your Heart," before returning to the Impressions, with the group signing for ABC Records and working with the label's Chicago-based producer and R manager Johnny Pate. Butler replaced Fred Cash as returning original Roosters member, and Mayfield became lead singer, frequently composing for the bands, starting with "Gypsy Woman," a top 20 hit. They hit "Amen," top 10, updated version of the old gospel tune. Was included in the soundtrack 1963 United Artists film Lilies of the Field. Wow, I didn't know that, which starred Sidney Poitier. The Impressions reached the height of their popularity in the mid to late 60s with the string of Mayfield compositions that include "Keep on Pushing," "People Get Ready," "It's All Right," all top 10. The uptempo "Talking About My Baby," top 20, and "Woman's Got Soul." He formed his own label, Kurt Tom Records, in Chicago in 1968, and the Impressions joined him to continue their run of hits, including "Food for You," "This Is My Country," "Choice of Colors," "Check Out Your Mind." Mayfield had written much of the soundtrack of the Civil Rights Movement in the early 1960s, but by the end of the decade, he was a pioneering voice in the Black Pride movement, along with James Brown and Sly Stone. Wow. Mayfield's "We're a Winner" was their last major hit for ABC, a #1 soul hit which also reached the Billboard Pop Top 20. It became an anthem of the Black Power and the Black Pride movements when it was released in 1967, much as his earlier Keep on Pushing, whose title quoted in the lyrics "We're a Winner" and also in "Move On Up," had been an anthem for Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. Mayfield was a prolific songwriter in Chicago, even outside his work for the Impressions, writing and producing scores of hits for many artists. He also owned the Mayfield and Wendy C labels, which were distributed by Cameo Parkway, and was a partner in the Curtom, first independent, then distributed by Buddha, then Warner Brothers, and finally RSO, and the Thomas label, first independent, then distributed by Atlantic, then independent again, and finally Buddha. Among Mayfield's greatest songwriting success were 3 hits that he wrote for Jerry Butler on VJ: "He Will Break Your Heart," "Find Another Girl," and "I'm Telling You." His harmony vocals are very prominent. He also had great success writing and arranging Jan Brantley's "Mama Didn't Lie," starting in 1963. He was heavily involved in writing and arranging Okea records, with Carl Davis producing, which include the hits by Major Lance, Walter Jackson, Billy Butler, and the Artistics. This arrangement ran through 1967. Wow. So let's look at the solo career. In 1970, Mayfield left the Impressions and began a solo career. Curtin released many of Mayfield's 1970 records, as well as records by the Impressions. Leroy Hudson, the Five Star Steps, the Staple Singers, Mavis Staples, Linda Clifford, Baby Huey and the Babysitters, Gene Chatler, and Major Lance, who had worked with Mayfield during the 1960s, also signed for a short stay at Curtin. Many of the labels recording were produced by Mayfield. I remember this period. Some of the great Chicago singers that I didn't even know Mayfield had produced, but knowing that this man was a genius, I knew that because early on in the 90s, I remember watching a documentary about, Curtis Mayfield and all the money he made for the Superfly soundtrack that we're going to get to now. Wow. Mayfield's first solo album, Curtis, was released in 1970, and it hit the top 20, as well as being a critical success. It predated Marvin Gaye's album, What's Going On, which had been compared to. Yes, this was the first political type album. The commercial and critical peak of his solo career came with Superfly. And you got to remember one of the first albums in that song, If There's a Hell Below. It was on the soundtrack of Dead Presidents later on in 1995. So with his solo career, Superfly, the soundtrack to the blaxploitation film, unlike the soundtracks to the other black exploitation films, notably Isaac Hayes' score for Shaft, which glorified the ghetto excesses of the characters. Mayfield lyrics consist of hard-hitting commentary on the state of affairs in black and urban ghettos at the time, as well as direct criticism of several characters in the film. Bob Donen wrote to the Rolling Stone magazine in 1972 that while the film's message was diluted by schizoid cross purposes because it glamorized machismo cocaine consciousness, the anti-message on Mayfield's soundtrack, it was far stronger, more definite than in the film because of the tendencies of these black exploitation films to glorify the criminal life of dealers, pimps, to target a mostly black, lower-class audience. Mayfield albums set the movie apart with songs like Freddie's Dead, a song that focused on the demise of Freddie, a junkie that was forced into pushing dope for the man because of a debt that he owed to his dealer. And Pusher Man, a song that reveals how many people in the ghetto fell victim to drug abuse and therefore became dependent on their dealers. Mayfield illuminated a darker side of life in the ghetto that these blaxploitation films often fail to criticize. However, although Mayfield's soundtrack criticized the glorification of drug dealers and pimps, he in no way denied that this glorification was occurring. When asked about the subject matter of these films, he quoted, stating, "I don't see why people are complaining about the subject of these films. And the way you clean up the films is by cleaning up the streets." Right on. Along with what's going on in Stevie Wonder's Innovisions, the album ushered in a new socially conscious, funky style of popular soul music. He was dubbed the Gentle Genius. Wow. Right on, brother. The single releases Freddie's Dead and Superfly, which sold over 1 million copies and were awarded gold discs by the RIAA. Great. Superfly brought success that resulted in Mayfield being tapped for additional soundtracks, some of which he wrote and produced while having others perform the vocals. Gladys Knight and the Pips recorded Mayfield's soundtrack for Claudine in 1974. Curtis Mayfield wrote the whole Claudine soundtrack, while Aretha Franklin recorded the soundtrack for Sparkle in 1976. He wrote the whole Sparkle soundtrack in 1976 for Aretha Franklin and the music for the film. Wow. Mayfield also worked with the Staple Singers on the soundtrack for the 1975 film Let's Do It Again, teamed up with Mavis Staples exclusively on the 1977 film soundtrack Piece of the Action, one of my brother's favorites. Both movies were part of a trilogy of films that featured the acting and comedic exploits of Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier and were directed by Poitier. Mayfield wrote all these soundtracks. This was his sound. If you hear the certain vocals like or you hear that horn, you hear the signature violins, you know that's Curtis Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield was hot as hell in the 1970s. He was blowing up. He was all over the place. He was that genius in the 70s. Like we got Prince in the 80s that was doing everything. Curtis Mayfield was the man that was doing everything in the 70s. You know, you can talk about dancing, you can talk about the entertainment value. In the 70s, it was Curtis. And you had a few geniuses like Stevie Wonder was the other. But in the late 70s, Stevie Wonder would emerge in the early 80s. But Curtis Mayfield was in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, in the mid 70s. Curtis Mayfield was the man, no doubt. In 1973, Mayfield released the Antiwar album Back to the World, a concept album that dealt with the social aftermath of the Vietnam War and criticized the United States' involvement in the wars across the planet. Wow, this was probably got him in trouble. One of Mayfield's most successful funk disco meldings was the 1977 hit Doo Doo Wop Is Strong in Here. From the soundtrack to the Robert M. Young film, Miguel Pinera's play Short Eyes. In his 2003 biography, Curtis Mayfield, People Never Give Up, author Peter Burns noted that Mayfield had 140 songs in the Curtin vaults. Wow, Curtis got a vault. Burns indicated that the songs were maybe already completed or in the stages of completion, so that they could then be released commercially. These records included The Great Escape, In the News, Turn Up the Radio, What's the Situation, and one recording label, Curtis at Montreux Jazz Festival in 1987. Two other albums featured Curtis presenting in the Curtin Vaults as yet unissued rare 1982-83 live recording titled 25th Silver Anniversary, which features performance by Mayfield and the Precious and Jerry Butler, and a live performance recorded in September 1966 by the Impressions titled Live at the Club Chicago. Wow. In 1980, Mayfield decided to move to Atlanta with his family, closing down his recording operations in Chicago, effectively ending the era of Chicago soul sound. That's right. The label had gradually reduced in size, and its final 2 years or so with releases on the main or SO imprint, and Curtin credited as the production company. Mayfield continued to record occasionally, keeping the Curtin name alive for a few more years and to tour worldwide trade industry in the hearts of New York Times Squares in the 1970s. In later years, Mayfield music was included in the movies I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, Hollywood Shuffle, Friday, though not on the soundtrack album, Bend It Like Beckham, The Hangover Part 2, Short Eyes, where he had a cameo role as a prisoner. Social activist, Curtis sang openly about civil rights and black pride and was known for introducing social conscience into African American music, having been raised in Cabrini Green projects. The Cabrini Green. He witnessed many of the tragedies of the urban ghetto firsthand and was quoted saying, "With everything I say on the streets as a young black kid, it wasn't hard." During the later 50s and 60s for me to write my heartfelt way of how I visualize things, how I thought things out to be. Following the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, his group The Impressions produced music that became the soundtrack of the Summer of Revolution. Wow. It is even said that Keep On Pushing became the #1 song along during the Freedom Rides. Black students sang their song as they marched to jail or protest outside their universities. While King often used Keep On Pushing, People Get Ready, and Real Winner because of the ability to motivate and inspire marchers. Mayfield had quickly became a civil rights hero with his ability to inspire hope and courage. Mayfield was the soundtrack. Keep On Pushing is one of my favorite songs, and it's a great song. When you look at that, People Get Ready, Real Winner, these are really socially conscious, inspired songs. And the earlier song, these songs inspired Motown to do what they did later in the late 60s and early 70s. Curtis Mayfield started. Mayfield was unique in his ability to fuse relevant social commentary with melodies and lyrics that instill a hopefulness for a better future in his listeners. He wrote and recorded the soundtrack to the 1972 blaxploitation film Superfly with the help of producer Johnny Pate. The soundtrack for the Superfly is regarded as all-time great body of work that captured the essence of life in the ghetto while criticizing the tendencies of young people to glorify the glamorous lifestyles of drug dealers, pimps, and illuminating dark reality of drug addiction and exploitation. Mayfield, along with several other soul and funk musicians, spread messages of hope in the face of oppression. Pride in being a member of the black race and gave courage to his generation of people who were demanding the human rights without abandoning the struggle for equality. He has been compared to Martin Luther King Jr. for making a lasting impact in the civil rights struggle with the inspirational music. By the end of the decade, Mayfield was a pioneering voice in the Black Pride movement along with James Brown and Sly Stone, paving the way for future generation rebel thinkers. Mayfield paid the price, artistically and commercially, for his political charged music. Mayfield Keep On Pushing was actually banned from several radio stations when riots began flaring up in some cities. Regardless of persistence, radio bans, and loss of revenue, he continued his quest of equality right into his death. His lyrics on racial injustice, poverty, and drug became the poetry of a generation. Mayfield was also descriptive social commentator as the influx of drug ravage through black America in the late 1960s and 70s. His bitter-sweet descriptions of the ghetto would serve as warnings to the impressionable. Freddie's Dead is a graphic tale of street life, while Pusha Man revealed the role of drug dealers in the urban ghettos. All right. Later years in death, Mayfield remained active in the 1970s. Then his career began to slow down during the 80s. In August 13, 1990, Mayfield became paralyzed from the neck down, and stage-light equipment fell on him at an outdoor concert in Wingate Field in Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York. Afterwards, though he was unable to play guitar, he continued to compose and sing. He also directed the recording of his last album, New World Order. Remember that Mayfield's vocals were recorded usually line by line while he was lying on his back. Mayfield received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1995. In February 1998, he had his right leg amputated due to diabetes. He was inducted into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame March 15, 1999. Health reasons prevented him from attending the ceremony. I remember that vaguely, which included fellow inductees Paul McCartney, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Dusty Springfield, George Martin, and the 1970s Curtin signees label mates, the Staple Singers. Mayfield's last appearance on record was with the group Brand Van 3000 on the song Astounded for their 2000 album Discosis, recorded just before his death and released in 2001. However, his health had steadily declined following his paralysis, so the vocals were new. Rather, they were lifted from archive recordings, including Moving On Up. Mayfield died from complications of type 2 diabetes on December 26, 1999 at North Fulton Regional Hospital in Roswell, Georgia. Legacy. Mayfield was among the first of a new wave mainstream black R&B performing artists, composers injecting social commentary into their work. The message music proved immensely popular during the 1960s and 70s. Mayfield taught himself how to play guitar, tuning it to the black keys of the piano, giving the guitar an open F sharp tuning that he used throughout his career. He primarily sang in falsetto register. I love falsetto. And another flavors to his music. This was not unique in itself, but most singers primarily in model register. His guitar playing, singing, socially aware, songwriting influenced a range of artists, including Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, Tracy Chapman, Sly Stone, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and Sinead O'Connor. And I'm gonna say Prince and D'Angelo. Curtis Mayfield had this effect. He had an effect. You can use your music and your platform for stuff like this, socially conscious stuff, activism. You don't have to make money or sell all the records, long as you're relevant or conscious. This lives longer. This have an effect years by. This stuff we see from artists, these fly-by-night artists we see today, they'll never have a lasting effect on their music. This is fly-by-night music. And you don't want to be labeled. It's a lot of people that don't think. This was what Prince was doing later in his career, where he was trying to be much more socially active, conscious, more relevant, using his platform for that, not to try to, sell records. And that's why I like Prince, because he used that platform and not to just be popular and to make fly-by-night type music. Curtis Mayfield made socially conscious music. He can make a hell of a record. He was a genius. And when I use genius serious, you got to be a singer, a producer, a writer. You got to do the whole nine, a musician. This is the Genius series. And we're going to continue with a lot of other geniuses. This is not over. So this is Rio 855 and Retro Rio, the new name to my channel. And I'm going to sign off. I'm going to say peace, God bless, thank you, like, comment, subscribe. Please subscribe, because this is getting interesting. And I got a lot more things to come, and I'm going to keep bringing the heat. So thank you, and God bless you.